What's up, everybody? I'm back. It's the NHSL panel show. It's not really a panel today, but we've got the extraordinary Justine Ruffino on the show. It's a pretty simple one. The regular season's over. It's gone. Goodbye.
That's it.
Done and dusted. That's it. Just like you and I met at the halfway point of the season, we just were we call the action together. We're seeing everything going on. We kind of set the stage for everybody going into the second half of the season. So I thought, hey, let's get each other together again and we'll break down the full season and preview a little bit about what could be happening in the championship series between the Brewers and the Extreme. It's exciting stuff. It's literally the business end of the season.
I know, it's crunch time. I mean, this is where you see the best in your players, you hope anyway.
So we're going to preview the finals, but first, we have to recap the last regular season game of the year. There wasn't much on the line in terms of standings, but don't tell the players that, especially the goalie, Andrew Glass. More on him in a second. Extreme got up early. It was 1-0. Then Zach Boyle got his 9th of the season, made it 1-1. It was 2-1 Extreme at one point, but it was just a surge of goals from the Brewers. 3 goals in the last 5 minutes. The Italian stallion, Nicola Powell, made it 4-2. Xander Wardlaw, hat-trick, scoring title. Right there, made it 4-3, but Tyler Leeming sealed the door late, made it 5-3. Eventually, they scored another goal. 6-3 was your final score for the Brewers. Did you watch the game, Justine?
I did.
From isolation?
From isolation, I definitely did. It was an interesting one. It was definitely not what you'd expect. The first period was very different to the second and third, but I mean, we'll go into that a little bit later.
Well, let's touch on Andrew Glass, because he was kind of the story for me of this game. He was the first star. This was a great moment. Not shorthanded, penalty shot. Xander Wardlaw looking for the scoring lead. Andrew Glass makes the save, gives a big celly. This guy, backup goalie, got the start as kind of a thank you for your hard work throughout the season. Stops 27 of the 30 shots going his way, and none of that is his gear. All of his gear got stolen before, so he's using Glenn Forbes White's pads, Sam Poole's skates, basically Sam O'Neill's everything else. It's a shared equipment there, and Glassy was awesome. He was the first star of the game by far. That was a turning point in the game when he stopped that penalty shot. That was great to see. Andrew Glass stick tap to you.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Not that I love that Andrew Glass's gear got stolen by any means, but I love that the hockey community gets together, bands together, and we piece together a kit for Andrew Glass, and he goes out there and absolutely plays his heart out. I love that. That
was awesome. He was the player of the game. Steve Best and Tyler Leeming continued their kind of good tandem they formed on the newly formed top line for the Brewers. That was a key story, but both teams had players missing. The Brewers didn't fly in Harley Anderson and Jaden Ryan like they normally do, and the Extreme missed 2 pretty key defenders in David Huxley and Graham Charbonneau. Backup goalie was played in Andrew Glass, though he was excellent. So even though it was a matchup of what we're going to see in the finals, it didn't really feel like this was the full-strength teams that we're going to see this coming week.
No, it didn't. And, you know, it did feel a little bit like there were pieces missing, especially Harley Anderson. That was a big one for me that I thought, is this gonna impact the Brewers? Is this gonna, you know, their front line, especially the last game he played?
Yeah, rounds out that second, third line, yeah.
Exactly. And it's, you know, because, you know, you think about losing top line players. It's not the top line players. It's the second and, you know, even sometimes the third line ones that make the whole thing come crashing down. And Harley's performance in the game previously was just so out of this world that, you know, you've missed someone like that. And the same kind of goes for Charbonneau. It's not, Joey said it himself, it's not the top point scorer, it's the calming presence, the experience of playing in the OHL, that person on the ice that takes care of guys like Xander Wardlaw and Nat Benson, and you could get worried.
Well,
you don't want to go into a corner with Graham Charbonneau.
And with no Charbonneau and no Huxley, it means that you have to probably move Jared Siemens back to defense, who's probably better suited as a forward. Not that he's playing bad at defense,
yes,
but just for numbers moving back there, and that thins out one of the lines. Well, I mean, they're Extreme Roll 3 pretty good lines, but Jared Siemens would be on one of those top lines if he wasn't playing defense. So it kind of has that trickle-down effect for both teams.
It does, absolutely.
Let's take a look at the scoring leaders. This is the final list. The mission for Xander Wardlaw on Friday night was hat-trick, gets you scoring title, and the lead there. He ends up with 10 goals, 7 assists, most points, beats out Johan Levesque. Nathaniel Benson ties him at 16 points. It was a pretty spectacular season. Joey Mcdougall not far behind. A lot of Extreme players crowding that list, but Xander Wardlaw gets the hat-trick, gets the scoring title, and he and Johan share the goal scoring, the equivalent of the Rocket Richard trophy. And you're looking at Xander Wardlaw, the all-time NHSL leading scorer.
I'm sure Xander's very happy about that. You can tell by his celebrations. I think that was one of his missions on Friday night.
Well, his family flew down. there was like 10 people in the crowd from New South Wales that flew in to watch Xander play.
Oh, not much more you can get to motivate you, is there?
It was pretty cool. Top D scorer was Zach Boyle. Let's take a look at the standings. This is how everything finished at the end of the year. A tie at the top, the Extreme and the Brewers. They also split their season series 2-2. Extreme get the first place nod because the Brewers only won 3 games in regulation. The Stars, those 2 overtime losses end up really costing them in games they could have probably won. So it's the Extreme, it's the Brewers. We're going to break down who they are. If you're new to hockey and you're watching this show, go tag a few people right now. This is what you want to watch. But first, let's say goodbye to the Stars. We can go somber now. A little rest in peace to the Noarlunga Stars. How close they came.
So many times.
So many times, but how far they were from the finals at the end of it. It was, they made it interesting. It comes to an end. The Stars season was just a bit frustrating at the end of the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, that's the word. That is the word. It was frustrating. There was a lot going on, I think, internally that, you've got players that don't really know each other, not that that's any excuse, same for the other 2 teams, but I think they were really looking for a solid leadership. And I don't know if that ever really took shape, if you ever really have that. I think Jake Riley was as close as you're going to get. He really tried to step up. But you are talking about someone who is 21 years old, playing with guys who have got 10 years on him. And I really feel like maybe at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough in those crunch moments. And they had so many where those stats you just saw could have been different, a matter of seconds, inches. It was just so tight.
Well, it's a good point. And Jan Kubik missed the last, well, we'll call it he missed the whole last game. He only played a couple shifts. He basically missed the last 3 games of the season, got hurt in the middle of that 4th one. So their captain and marquee player missed the last half of the season. Josh Harding missed the last half of the season. A lot of key outs. Glenn Forbes-White got caught up as a close contact at one point. But you talk about close, Justine. They were up 7-0 in a game and they lost.
Yeah.
They were up 3-2 on a power play with 3 minutes to go in a game, and they allowed a shorthanded goal, and they lost. They allowed a shorthanded goal to the Extreme when they were up 3-1. That changed the momentum of the game, and they lost. And when it comes down to me, they did not score a power play goal in 2022.
Nope.
4 games, bunch of opportunities. Those 1-goal games get turned pretty quickly if you do that.
Absolutely, and there's no arguing with the stats. I mean, you can even tell with their face-offs that it was a little bit of a lack of control at times. And you've got guys who can win face-offs. You really want to be screaming at them like, boys, you need control. You need to be getting these face-off wins. The Extreme at some stages, they were just all over him with that.
Shout out to a couple players in particular. Glenn Forbes-White finishes the competition among the qualified goalies for top save percentage. He had a couple big games this season, a couple big saves. Glenn Forbes-White was a nice stabilizing presence at times. Think back to that one game where he made 42 saves in a 4-3 win over the Brewers in a game they really did have to have. Glenn was really, really good, and he put his body on the line.
Oh, he absolutely did. I made the comment last game they played. Glenn carried that team. Like, literally, he just pulled out every single thing in the book, and he made it so he was unbeatable to an extent. But no goalie is unbeatable completely. And I really feel like Glenn, as a whole, just had such an amazing season. Like, coming back from injury, really pulling out the stops and making players stop and think, well, if we're going to win this game, we need to get past Glenn.
Johan Levesque, another big shout out to him. He finishes tied for the league lead in goals, and up until the last game, he was the point leader. He was special to watch. He wasn't drafted. He was a development player. What a season Johan had. You're probably the best player on the Stars.
I would say so. I would say that he would be the best player on the Stars. And I think that it's one of those interesting things with Johan Levesque. It's not skill. You talk about Xander Wardlaw, you talk about Zach Boyle, you talk about these players that are so skilled. Johan Levesque is pure confidence and grit, and he just gets it done. He is the hardest player to read. You've had defensemen say that, you've had goalies say that. He just does it.
Well, that will do it for the Noarlunga Stars. So, adios, Stars. That's it for the season. You will rarely get a mention. You'll get a mention here or there, but our focus is shifted to the 2 teams that are playing for the chocolates. a nice little check that they can win, the inaugural NHSL trophy in the league that they said could never happen. Someone's going to be hosting a trophy. It's a best-of-5 series. So if you're new to hockey, if you're new to series, this isn't like footy where it's just that one-game elimination playoff. This is North American series style. So it's the first one to win 3 games. Every game matters, and I can guarantee you these teams are going to be sick of each other at the end of this series.
I kind of hope so. I think it'll be more interesting that way.
It is, and NHL playoff hockey is so exciting, right? It's because it's those long series. You have all these storylines. You have those adjustments going through. I'm excited to see a team play each other a bunch of times in a row, and those coaches make the adjustment.
Oh, absolutely. And, you see teams playing each other in Game 7. They are hating each other because they're so sick to death of going through this process over and over and over again. I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see some frustration come out because, you go through the same lines, you play the same people. If something doesn't change, it does become really overwhelming.
Well, let's break down each of the teams for the newbies out there that maybe don't know who they are. Maybe you just want a refresher. You're coming to the game, you're watching in the intermission, and you're saying, who the heck am I watching? Let's start with the Brewers. They had a 5-3 record this year. They won 2 of those games in overtime, 1 in overtime, 1 in a shootout. That's how their season started. They needed to win their last couple games just to get into the finals, and they really did turn it on in clutch time. Steve Best led the way with 13 points. Zach Boyle led the way with 9 goals, and he's a defenseman. Their goaltender, Mcdougall, he had a few really special saves and performances this year. We'll start with that key stat, Justine. You're seeing a lot of goals being played on this clip right here. They've scored 34 goals in their last 4 games. 34 goals in their last 4 games. You saw that on Friday night. They had 1 goal up until that midway point, and then they just hammered home a bunch of goals. It's when this offense gets rolling, they're hard to stop.
And it's not one player. You saw last Friday night, 6 goals, 6 goal scorers. And whereas the Extreme, Xander Wardlaw gets a hat trick. Nobody else touches the netting. So you've got to ask yourself, is this the most well-rounded team? Is this the team that's going to get it because they are strong across the board? Because they don't need one player to get a hat trick. They've got 6 players who can get goals.
And they've got some players that have put their team on their back. Zach Boyle did have that hat trick in 1 game where he dragged them back, but you're absolutely right. They've got a long list of players who scored goals. Dylan Pope was scoring goals on the weekend. Reggie Machos, Jeremy Klein, they were chipping in some goals and some points. And now that top line, I'll be very curious to see what happens when Jaden Ryan and Harley Anderson come back in the lineup, because Harley was a couple games ago. But do you break up that top line that's been formed the last 2 games of Steve Best, Nicola Powell, and Tyler Leeming? Because Leeming and Best alone, they've combined for 9 points their last 2 games. Powell's chipped in with 3, and he's got a goal. Do you tamper with that?
Look, I probably would. Because I think that for the Brewers, I think that they're more versatile than the Extreme. I do. I think that they can be, they've got guys, they communicate well, they play well together. You tweak it here and there, but yeah, I think you could play around with it. I think they've got guys there that are smart enough, they'll adapt.
So if you have a newbie coming to the game on Friday night, who would you tell them are their best player or 2? I know they're versatile, there's a lot of guys that step up, but if you're saying keep your eyes on these 2 players, who would be one of them that you would say?
Oh, Zach Boyle. First name comes to mind, for sure. And this is because I've got a huge defenseman background. But the thing is, you say who's your best player. How many players do you have that can score a hat trick as a forward, but still be probably your strongest defenseman? How many players have that quality? 9 goals, yes. But nobody's talking about the fact that he is probably the best defenseman in the Brewers. He is a solid D. He hits, he tracks the puck extremely well, and he scored 9 goals. When
it mattered the most, you think back to that game where they would have been eliminated if they lost to the Extreme just 2 weeks ago. Zach Boyle has 2 goals and 2 assists. He was probably hard done by not getting a star in the last game versus the Extreme too. I had a couple people that came to the game, my dad included. He came to the last 2 games in Australia. It's pretty cool having him here. And I was like, what did you think of the game? And he's like, oh, man, number 6 on the Brewers. Everything runs through him. And it's noticeable. Everything does kind of run through Zach Boyle, doesn't it?
It does. And you know what? I feel bad for Zach because I've known Zach since he was 5 years old. Anybody living in Adelaide knows Zach Boyle. And I feel like you kind of expect Zach to be extraordinary. You actually, you put him in that bracket and you go, yeah, but we know Zach's going to be good. So we barely talk about him because, well, we do talk about him, but when we don't, it's because we just have that expectation for him to be great because he always is great.
A marquee player for a reason. What about a forward on the Brewers?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if look, I love Stevie. Stevie's style of play as a forward is one of my favourite things to watch because he's a physical forward. He's not a little movie forward like Xander Woodlaw. He's a big forward. He can make moves, he can take checks, but this goal right here, you can see it. He picked that spot from a mile away, and that's Jeremy Friedrich. Jeremy Friedrich is a fantastic goalie. To do that to someone like Jeremy Friedrich, there's no denying Steve Best's got skill.
I think the Steve Best that we really wanted to see has come alive in probably the last 4 periods of hockey, to be honest. He's had a really solid season from start to finish. He led the team in points. He's a marquee player. We expected it. But I thought Johan Levesque on the broadcast made a couple interesting points about Steve, and he said that he's been impressed by Steve's vision. There's him getting tough. He can do it all,
Yeah,
Steve Best.
he can.
But in the last 2 games, he has a goal and 5 assists. He's opening up lanes for people. His vision's going well. He's not necessarily looking to score first. He's looking to set up his teammates. And when he's playing that team-style game, which he does a lot, that's what makes him that forward, he's really hard to stop, and he opens up a lot of avenues for his teammates like Tyler Leeming, who's now starting to jag a couple goals.
Absolutely. And that's that, like you said, the vision. If you've got a player who is that skilled and they don't have that vision, they just think, I need to score goals, that is limiting. Whereas Steve has opened his eyes, 5 assists. And he was, second and third period, Friday night, he really opened his eyes up. He really constructed a lot of plays that just made the Extreme look like they were chasing their tails.
What do you think was that season-defining game for the Brewers, or their best game, you think?
I mean, it's hard to go past Game 7, 7 goals down, and nobody knows how, really, do we? They just pulled out an 8-7 win. And I spoke to Steve Best's mum. I think she was my favourite person who I spoke to about this. I said, Michelle, how did they do it? And she goes, they just never give up. They never, ever give up.
That's a great point. Use those words, never give up. See, I'm going to disagree with you slightly, because I do agree that the season-defining game was they were down 7 goals, and they came back and they won 8-7. And it's defining because in every single one of the Brewers games, it doesn't matter if they're down by 1 goal, 2 goals, or 7 goals. They always find a way to come back and make it really close and interesting at the end. Shorthanded on a power play, or shorthanded with 3 minutes to go and down by a goal, they're going to find a way to score that goal and force it into overtime. I think, though, their best game, because I don't know if the players would be happy to even be down 7-0 in that situation. So it's tough for me to say that that's their best game. I actually think their best game was either the last game they played versus the Extreme or the one they played just before to kind of eliminate the Stars. Dominate the shot total. Face-offs a bit more close to that 50% mark. They play a bit more of that team game in transition coming out of their zone. And the results have spoke to themselves. They've had 2 victories that are 1 by 2 goals, 1 by 3 goals. They're starting to play their best hockey right now. And I actually think their best game might have been that elimination game versus the Stars 2 games ago when they absolutely needed to win, and they just overwhelmed the Stars. They just kept coming and coming and coming and coming and coming, wore them down, broke through with a couple goals late, and that's what won it. So I'm going to say that was their best one, because that's what we saw. You see a lot from a team when their back is against the wall, just like when they were down 7-0. And you're right, this team don't quit.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you know what? It's one of those characteristics of, it doesn't mean that they're more skilled, but they can still win if they don't give up.
Let's talk about the Adelaide Extreme. That is their opponent. The Extreme, same record. 5 wins, 3 losses. They split the series with the Brewers. They won the first game, lost the second game, won the third game, lost the fourth game versus the Brewers, although the last game there wasn't as much on the line. 5-3 record. Xander Wardlaw led the way, 10 goals, 7 assists, finishes with 17 points. Nathaniel Benson, 16 points. Joey Mcdougall, 13 points. That top line, who was that? Combined 47 points between 3 players. Come on. That is ridiculous. Xander Wardlaw, though, unbelievable. Kudos to him for winning the point total, and he was electric as ever, and probably a player we need to circle going into the finals.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, you know, this is where guys like Xander Wardlaw, they do come through and they do shine. I think there was a few games there where teams like the Stars, you know, they covered Xander really well, but last Friday night, he didn't care who was covering him. He was getting goals. And I think that those are the people you want, the ones who really, really want to score goals. He is a hungry, hungry player.
For me, what separates the Extreme is, look, I'm a guy that I really believe in fundamentals. You do the little things well, big things tend to happen. And what the Extreme have done really well in 2022 is with a cobbled defense core, with players in and out of the lineup, COVID here and there, all over the place. They've secured the minor premiership, but it was really through their special teams for me. They've scored a power play goal in every game in 2022. They led the league with a 22% mark in power play, and it wasn't even close. They look threatening every time, and they've allowed one shorthanded goal. I think the number is they're 22 of 23 they've killed off. And the one shorthanded, or the one power play goal they did allow was the one where Jeremy Klein put it in front of the net. It tipped off a stick, then off Jordan Geyer's face and into the back of the net. So that was almost a fluky one that they've allowed. They just get it done fundamentally on special teams, and they take advantage of opportunities and they eliminate it for the other team.
No, I completely agree. And I think that we saw very early, they are very different to both these other two teams, certainly from the Brewers, in that their special teams and their systems overall are very, very, very well structured. They have control. They come out of the box and they are just, face-offs are on point. All their systems are on point. They're moving, they're cycling, they're everywhere. And this is something that people contended with at the start of the season, struggled with. I think the Brewers kind of got their heads around it a little bit and they really, they combated it. I don't think that the Stars ever really did. I think the Stars were still kind of chasing them by the end of it.
If the Extreme don't have Graham Charbonneau or David Huxley or one of the two or both in the finals, does that compromise their systems?
I would say yes. I mean, I'm going to be that person because I really value defense and I really value that the stability that Graham Charbonneau and David Huxley bring, that experience that they bring. And I really believe that this is something that needs to happen. Those guys need to be there to not just calm the bench, but to be those people at the back end taking care of that first line that is doing so much damage.
Well, Graham Charbonneau, normally paired with Andrew Chen. Again, I'm going to steal from Johan Levesque, who was on the broadcast, made the note saying when Graham Charbonneau is moving the puck around, he's at that stable presence, it frees up Andrew Chen to be his best player. You can take a look at the screen there. Charbonneau set up a couple assists, but it allows Andrew Chen to be a bit more free moving up and down the ice and allow him to skate around, and he provides that balance from top to bottom on this core. And of course, David Huxley. He's one of the best players to ever strap him on in Australian hockey. Yep. Those two guys, they need to be in the lineup for the Extreme because the Brewers, remember, they scored 34 goals their last 4 games. You need those two defensemen to help your goalie out.
Oh, you absolutely do. And that's exactly what you need. You need those big guys who have experience, who are coming. They set the plays without even having to really move that much. They just have the vision and they have the control.
So what about that one, the best player that you think, if you wanted to define that, never come to a game before? Who are you saying, keep your eye out for this guy?
I'm going to be that annoying person and say Jeremy Friedrich, the goalie. Look, he has absolutely stood on his head for this team, and their front line is amazing, don't get me wrong. Hard to choose between those three, Nathaniel Benson, Joey Mcdougall, Xander Wardlaw. Hard to choose between the three of them. Equally, I think, as effective as each other. But Jeremy has just absolutely put his heart and soul on the line for this team. You've seen him. He's been inside the net, on his head. He's just absolutely thrown his soul into this team.
I think when it comes down to it, you can really simplify this series, and you can relate that back to Jeremy Friedrich. For the Extreme to win, Jeremy Friedrich needs to be the best player on the ice.
Absolutely.
And he has that capability. He's won back-to-back championships with the Jokers. However, he can't afford to get out-dueled by Matusz Trinka. If you think about that game, that was the 7-6 game right before Christmas that the Brewers won. They scored a goal on their first shot of the game on a weird angle on Jeremy Friedrich. And both goalies weren't that good in that game, to be honest. But the difference was Matusz Trinka made, 1 or 2 more saves than Jeremy Friedrich. So which goalie between Trinka and Friedrich is going to make the 1 or 2 more saves? Because these teams are going to be close.
And I know it's so tough because they are such good friends off the ice and they're really close and they are so good in so many different ways. They're actually 2 very different goalies, but so good in their own right. And I think that for them, I would be really hard-pressed I wouldn't put it on them. I'd be saying to the defense, if you want your goalie to perform, you need to be there. You need to be backing him up because everything after the first shot, that's on you.
Look, I'm going to say for the best player, it has to be Showtime Joey Mcdougall.
I think you're biased, Eric.
No, I'm not biased. Look at this. When this team needs a goal the most, you can look at this. This was a shorthanded goal.
He
can play center. He can play wing. They've used him playing with young kids like Gaziorowski or Noah Maley and Jared Siemens are on the top line. He's the leader of the team and a marquee player for the reason because when you need a goal the most, Showtime always seems to be there. Joey Mcdougall, he leads the league in face-off percentage. He'll be a case for one of the MVPs of the season. So I think that Joey Mcdougall needs to have that big season. But I do think that if Jeremy Friedrich isn't their best player on the ice, the Extreme won't win the series.
No, I agree. And you know what? It's true. And Joey probably has the biggest fan base now, which is also
People are
a
going,
highlight.
Google, yeah. What about season-defining game for the Extreme?
Oh, I mean, look, I actually think they made their presence known very early. As I was flicking through the games, I actually thought that their game 3, they came out against the Stars, and it wasn't that they didn't contend with the Extreme. Their systems and the way they took control, they just played around them. And they really set the tone early that we are playing a different style of hockey to you, and our style works.
The big question is the Perth borders open up in a couple weeks? Jamie Woodman on a plane here, that's a game changer.
Oh, it's a complete game changer. And I mean, in the defensive end for the Extreme, that is a complete game changer.
So those are the two teams. That's what's set. It's the first one to win 3 games. Recap of the season series. Extreme won game 1, 5-3. Brewers won game 2, 7-6. Extreme won game 3, and this was one of my defining games for the Extreme. They beat the Brewers 7-5. They were down by 2 goals twice in the third period, and they kept finding goals to come back and win that game. And the Brewers then just on Friday night won 6-3. So let's start with game 1. Justine, I want an oddly specific prediction. I'll give one too for how game 1 is going to go.
Look,
Friday night.
I think that Showtime is really chomping at the bit. I don't think he didn't get any, last Friday night. I think that he's really keen. I think he'll be one of the first to score. Probably, let me give you I reckon 3 minutes in, Showtime will make it really tough for the Brewers, and he'll set the tone and say, I'm here, and I'm in your face, and I'm scoring goals tonight. And I think that's going to make it very nice and heated very early. I also think that as soon as Showtime gets going, it'll prompt people like Steve Best. They'll be thinking, okay, all right, it's game on. And, I think you'll see a back and forth there. I think a couple minutes later, I do. I think we're going to go back and forth with these teams because, equally speaking, they both want it. They're both getting a bit gritty at each other, even last Friday night. So I think that what we're going to see is back and forth. And then I think that the Brewers, I think that they're going to outmaneuver them purely on emotional stability in a way. I think that the Extreme to have a tendency, if without Charbonneau and without Huxley, I think they have a tendency their mouths can run away with them a little bit. They can get themselves in a bit of trouble. You don't want Joey Mcdougall going into the box. You don't want that. He is a force on the ice.
So what's the game 1 scoreline?
It's going to be tough. I think it's going to be, I want to say 5-3. Brewers.
Okay, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that the Brewers are going to continue this wave that they've been riding, and they're going to score 4 goals in the first period, maybe 3 different goal scores, and they're going to be up 4-0 after the first period. Sorry, Extreme fans. Then it's going to be 5-2 after the second period, and then there's going to be a big talk in that Extreme room, and Jeremy Friedrich is going to play ridiculous in the third period, make a couple big saves. Joey Mcdougall's going to score. Noah Maley is going to score, and then it's going to be, I'm going to say Jordan Geyer is going to score a game-tying goal with less than 2 minutes left to make it 5-5 and force overtime. And then halfway through overtime, Xander Wardlaw is going to score the winner, and I'm going to say the Extreme are going to win 6-5 in my oddly specific prediction of game number 1.
Guess we'll have to see. Might have to put some money on it.
Series prediction. What's the series finals? You don't have to go too specific, but who's going to win the series, and what's the series score going to be?
I think we're going to game 5. I think we are. I think we're definitely going to go to game 5. And I think that it's going to, in that game, I think that by the halfway through the third period, you're going to see a bit of a snap, and one team will run away, and the other one will basically either lose it. And in hockey terms, when you say that, you mean you just get a bunch of penalties and act like you don't, really want to win the game anymore. One of them will. I don't know who, and it's a really tough one. But I think in game 5, we're going to see a bit of a snap moment, and I think that at that moment, you're going to know who's going to win.
I think that it's going to go to game 5 as well, and I think that the Extreme are going to win 1 game in overtime. I think the Brewers are going to win 1 game in overtime. I think the Brewers are going to blow out the Extreme in 1 game. I think the Extreme are going to blow out the Brewers in 1 game, and I think that the final game in game 5 after a chaotic NHSL season is going to be low scoring. We're going to have our lowest scoring game in game 5, and I'll let people decide who they think is going to win game 5. I can't pick.
No, I honestly can't either. I think that, like I said, I think it's going to be struggle town, probably low scoring, you're probably right. And then I think there's going to be a moment where the momentum shifts and it doesn't go back.
It'll be a fun one to watch. There's nothing better than playoff hockey. A best-of-5 series starts this Friday night. Justine, thanks for breaking it down for you. And we'll see you Friday night, SBS On Demand, 2 p.m. on NITV on the following day. It's the Brewers. It's the Extreme. It's the NHSL Championship Series. We'll have the call. We'll see you then.